in Cornish. I'm an associate professor at the University of East Anglia. I'm also admissions director for the School of Social Work, and what that means is that I'm responsible for the recruitment and the applications of BA and MA social work students. So I'm from England. I'm originally from Cape Town in South Africa, but I have been practicing in the UK for over 20 years.
Thank you so much once again joining VISO platform, Dr. Kalina Cornis, Associate Professor. You've already briefed up yourself, introduction, UK Commonwealth Organization, you have your affiliation, England Committee member, and University of East Anglia. Social work, you are into academic research, NSP, CC Policy Committee co-opting. You have these affiliations and you are an esteemed academician and researcher, well-known name. So we are very much glad to have you on this platform of ESO. Thanks, ma'am, once again joining. A wonderful topic we are going to cover. It says like reimagining placement equity, addressing racism and empowering educators through SAWUBONA Framework. A wonderful framework, it seems. Thanks a lot once again joining. Would like to move on to my first question. A very important question says, what inspired you to explore the placement experience of Black, Asian and minority ethnic students at UEA?
Thanks for the question. The reason why we conducted a cross-faculty research is because within the School of Social Work, our head of school, Professor Christine Cocker, oversees all the activities of the school curriculum and how students are achieving in placement and also on the course. And she realized that over the years, there had been a much larger number of students from Black, Asian, ethnic, minoritized backgrounds who had problems on student placements or who have been failing their placements, and she was curious to find out why that was the case. At the same time, there was a discussion with the head of school for education who had a similar issue happening with university students who were doing their education courses like teacher training courses, because a lot of the students that do the teacher training qualifications, many of them are also international students that come from abroad, and amongst them there were a disproportionately higher number of failures. And the same thing happened with students who are doing health studies, so nursing, physiotherapy. There seems to have been student placement issues where students either fail or it takes longer for them to complete their BA and MA degree courses. And we wanted to understand what the circumstances are. Why is it that these students are facing issues on student placements, so that we can address it and make sure that there is equality and that the students, when they go out on placements, that they are able to achieve when they go out on placements.
Thanks a lot responding to some one questions, such a wonderful narrative. We understand why reasons like Black, Asian and minority ethnic students UAE supporting. Would like to move on to my second question. A very important question says, what were some of the most striking or unexpected findings from your cross-faculty research study?
The striking thing for us was the reality that experiences of racism happen not just in social work, but it happened across all three areas we were looking at. We also realized that when students are facing racism, they are expected to almost deal with it on their own. They get advice, but they would be expected to deal with it on their own. And the argument we put forward was that shouldn't be the case. It should be the responsibility of the practice educators that advocate on behalf of the students and make sure that racism is addressed, because what we want is for a placement environment that is supportive, a placement where students can learn and that there isn't worries about racism on top of learning a new course. So those were some of the most striking and unexpected kind of findings. The reality that in these professions, social work is supposed to be a profession that social justice is being upheld, but in social work we shouldn't have racism, and yet there are experiences of racism amongst the staff and people that we are trying to do a service to.
Responding to this important question, students struggling and facing racism, and how you are developing anti-instrumental possibilities for them to, sort of make things proper. Now, would like to move on to my third question. A very important question says, can you explain the
SAWUBONA?
Can you explain the SAWUBONA framework and how it supports clinical educators in improving placement experiences?
So it's important to mention that SAWUBONA is an African philosophy, which means I see you, I see the whole of you. And it's important because when you see someone's human worth. You don't see them just as a problem, or you don't have the emotional or psychological disconnect. You see them as a person deserving of respect, deserving of your time and your attention. So with SAWUBONA, the framework, how that was developed was, it was based on a previous research I did with birth mothers who are also Black, Asian, ethnic minoritized, who's experienced racism within statutory social work. And it was from those findings the students on placement similarly experienced similar racism where they felt they weren't seen. So SAWUBONA, the first letter of SAWUBONA stands for C. So making sure that when practitioners work with students on placement, they see the student within their holistic context. They see them within their social networks, their political circumstances, to see the person. A stands for acknowledge. So clinical educators are expected to acknowledge the culture shock when you come from a new country and you're now working in England, that there are different curriculum, there are different experiences, and so we need to acknowledge that and find out how we can better support the students. W is worth, recognizing that students have worth. Even when they make mistakes, the mistakes don't define them, that they still deserving of, the time. They do matter and they value. So the framework highlights the worth. U is that they are unique individuals. We can't treat students like they a general kind of population. They all have unique histories, and it's the job of the clinical educator to find out the unique experiences of that particular student they're supporting. B stands for bear with. So you have to have patience, you have to bear with the student because English may not be their first language. Sometimes the students are struggling with accents, they don't understand the British culture, so the clinical educator has to understand that. O is for opportunities, so you have to create opportunities for students' voices to be heard. You have to make available interpreters if needed as part of the learning experiences. N stands for negotiation, so you negotiate and keep your power in check. And A is availability, you have to make yourself available. So in doing all of this, the SAWUBONA framework give clinical educators a working knowledge of how to better support students on placement and which questions to ask.
Yeah, thank you so much responding this philosophy of SAWUBONA. It's very important that each letter has a specific connotation and message and reason at the back of it. Thank you so much for being here, and for the very first time, I'm sure this is going to help our audience quite a lot. RESO platform on. Would like to move on to my fourth question. A very important question says, how does racial literacy, or the lack of it, affect assessment outcomes for minority, Black and ethnic students in health sciences placements?
So if staff don't have a working knowledge of how to work with students who are Black, Asian, ethnic minoritized, then there is error that can creep into their judgments. So the lack of racial literacy can be seen in situations where students aren't understood. Sometimes they're not given time to clearly communicate how they understand certain things. So if students are being perceived as unknowledgeable or unprofessional, this is where students can be marked down, because in health sciences, professionalism is such an important point. Timekeeping is a key thing. But if students, for example, don't know how to travel to their placement, or in their culture, being 2 minutes late is not a problem, this is where they can be marked down and they can fail placement. So having an understanding of someone's cultural understanding, the issues they have about English, the fact that they could experience racism on placement, and when racism happens, students go into a state of paralysis. They can't think straight. They have emotional wounding, and then on top of that, they expected to perform professional competencies. That can't happen. So racial literacy is important, because when clinical educators are racially literate, they can then understand that if racism has happened, I can't expect the students still to do this assessment if they're hurting. I first need to deal with the issue that caused racism, make sure my student feels psychologically safe before I do my direct observation or whatever assessment needs to take place. So racial literacy is important, because it will determine how you treat people, how you speak to them, and how you support your students on placement.
Well said. Thank you so much for responding this important question, like assessment outcomes and science placement and how it operates actually. So would like to move on to my fifth question, wrap-up question, or final questions. What practical changes would you like to see in clinical education to ensure equity and cultural sensitivity in student placement?
Excellent. One of the first obvious things would be more recruitment of Black, Asian, ethnic minoritized staff in health sciences, especially in the roles of clinical educators. So they need to employ or promote staff to take on those roles, because racial representation is important. The second thing they could do is deal with the curriculum. Like the things they are being taught, the modules that they've been taught as part of their learning, needs to include voices and theories of practitioners and academics from other parts of the world. You can't just have Eurocentric teaching and white people's views being taught to students. That is out of touch with reality, so we need to decolonialize the curriculum. We need to introduce more readings, more assessments from global perspectives, people from other parts of the world. And the other important thing is about making sure that SAWUBONA, the framework, is being used when supporting students, because it actually the framework has conversation starters. It's got all the questions people could ask under each acronym to make sure that people have a better profile of their students and they know how to support their students. So those are three practical changes they could do, and also making sure there are clear processes for reporting and dealing with racism within student placement, so that students know who to report to, and that be assured that something is going to be done about their experiences.
Thanks a lot for responding this important topic like SAWUBONA Framework and Black and Asian and minority ethnic students at UEA. And most striking unexpected findings from your cross-faculty research. You've shared with us explanation of SAWUBONA Framework. You've shared with us and racial literacy and how it's important in assessment outcomes and what practical changes would you like. You mentioned that. Thank you so much for covering this important topic. We've covered this topic for the very first time, and I'm sure that audience at RESO will certainly draw a major chunk of benefits by sharing your perspectives and great insights. So thank you so much once again for sharing this platform on. As you're already familiar that RESO is a platform where we try to step through the noise to pursue most reliable and relevant scientific information from a sociological perspective, covering almost every domain, but giving it a sociological texture to make a society more better society with better possibilities, and also touching and giving a good look to sort of shaping academia and research. So that's the very purpose of RESO platform. Thank you so much once again, ma'am, joining us from England.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ms. Brenda. Thank you.